Welcome to the archives. Please enjoy your stay. Today, I humbly present you a true Reddit Let's Not Meet tale. This story begins sometime around my junior year of high school. I was 15 years old, female, and in that phase of my life where I didn't listen to anyone, yet at the same time was completely impressionable. At the beginning of the year, I was sitting in my 6th period chem class, probably zoned out, looking at my phone under the clunky gray lab table, when I heard two people laughing to my right. The classroom was set up like a long rectangle, so essentially, the teacher wouldn't really be able to hear what was going on in the back. The people laughing were a guy and a girl, Eric and Callie. They were somewhat popular, not the top of the food chain by any means, but everyone knew them. My younger sister knew Eric. They had a tennis match a month or two earlier. Eric was funny. This is a crucial element to this story. He was definitely the class clown. He was tall, good-looking, and extremely charismatic. I wasn't attracted to him, but I could see why everyone else was. I think it was at this point in time where I made one of the most regrettable decisions of my life. I decided I wanted to be friends with Eric. Eric was in my 2nd, 5th, and 6th periods. The next morning, I poked him in the back in Spanish class. "Hey," I said, "I heard my sister kicked your ass in tennis." He turned around with a goofy smile, his friends all looking at me. "Who's your sister?" His voice had a specific cadence to it. "Karen," I replied. I don't remember the rest of this encounter, but I'm pretty sure he denied losing the tennis match. I think the conversation ended shortly thereafter, and my day continued until I saw him in math class. Algebra 2 was one of those classes where the teacher would lecture for a while, give us homework, and then let us have the rest of the period to work on it, so we wouldn't have to do it when we got home. I was looking at my paper, probably confused, when I hear a familiar voice. "Hey girl." I looked down to see Eric, crouched next to my desk on the floor. "What's up?" He started asking me about tennis, and once I said that I played, a huge smile spread across his face. I think this is when he latched on to me. He asked for my phone number, and I gave it to him. The next day, in our next period, he introduced me to Callie. She was older and really intimidating. I had never met anyone like her before, and I was beginning to get excited at the prospect of these new, interesting friends. That night, he kept texting me nonstop. He would ask me questions, and then would reply LOL to everything I said. I thought it was weird, but that was just his humor. After that day, he didn't leave my side. We spent most of the school day together, and we would be in constant contact after school. This was 2011, so we were mostly on Facebook or doing group phone calls with Callie and two other friends of mine I had brought into the group, Sasha and Natalie. There were a lot of red flags. Eric wanted me to hold hands with him at school and told everyone he had taken my virginity. For some reason, This wasn't something I got too mad about. I just thought it was weird. He would say, "Your virginity belongs to me." Again, I assumed it was a joke. I always assumed Eric wasn't attracted to girls, because he said he wasn't. Although, he would have sex with them, and then tell everyone, making fun of them. He would walk down the hallway after 5th period, and he would stop for a group of freshman girls waiting for him, to give them each a peck on the lips. One time, we were walking to the bus, and there was a girl about 10 feet in front of us. She was cheating on her boyfriend, which I whispered to him, pointing her out. Yes, it was childish, but keep in mind this was high school, and I was 15. He proceeds to run towards her and stops her, only to point at me and tell her what I said. She came over and yelled at me, and he watched, laughing. A few months into the friendship, I began sneaking out with Eric, bringing him alcohol from my dad's liquor cabinet. Eric was a heavy drinker, especially considering our age. This came to a head when he asked Callie and I to come over one night. His dad was in prison, and his mom was in rehab, so he lived with his grandparents. We pulled up outside of his house, and his car wasn't there. We waited for a while, and finally, he sped into the neighborhood and stumbled out of the driver's side, completely wasted. We followed him inside. His grandparents weren't home. I don't know what I said, but next thing I know, he grabs a knife off the kitchen counter and charges at me. I took off running and made it into Callie's car, slamming the door shut and locking it. He stares at me through the window before bursting out in laughter. My heart was racing and my blood ran cold. Callie got into the car and we left. I don't know why I stuck around. It was like an abusive relationship. He told me he was the only guy who would ever find me attractive, but somehow it would turn into a joke, and I would just let it go. I believe the breaking point was when I heard about the baby squirrel. He had found a live baby squirrel after school and brought it home. His grandparents said they didn't want it in the house, so he walked outside and tossed it into the retention pond before walking back in. I wasn't there for that, but it disgusted me. In algebra, a few days later, he knocked my pen off my desk and called me a bitch. "Eric, I don't want to be friends with you anymore," I told him firmly. "Don't talk to me." His head snapped back, and he moved to the desk in front of mine. "You won't be able to ignore me," he laughed. "I know where to find you." "I'm going to college next year," I reminded him. "You'll never be able to get away from me." "Are you threatening me?" "Why, yes I am." I know this sounds like a cheesy horror movie, but that was our exchange, word for word. The next week was endless phone calls and him trying to get me to talk to him at school. At first, it wasn't so serious when he thought I was going to change my mind, and then he came up to me in math class and opened his backpack. Inside were several large kitchen knives, in case there's a zombie attack, and another big smile. I should have told the teacher at that point. I really should have. But it wasn't until a few days later when he pushed me too far. "I'm going to rape you. then murder you, and I'll make Natalie film it." I went to the dean's office and told them everything. I had grown up being told not to snitch, but I couldn't focus in class anymore. I had been a good kid. I'd never been in trouble, so they believed what I had told them. But here's the kicker. They called him into the office, and he admitted to everything, nodding, smiling, confirming all of the stories I'd told them. The dean sat me down the next day and told me that I needed to call the police. They said that there was clearly something wrong with him, and that he didn't get it. They put a school version of a restraining order on him. He wasn't allowed to talk to me, and during tests, he had to be taken into a separate classroom. He would do everything he could to get around those rules. He would talk about me right in front of my face, but wasn't technically talking to me. He said out loud to the class, "Some girl put a restraining order on me because she thinks I'm dangerous." The teacher laughed and said, "Doesn't she know you're joking? That's just you being Eric?" The backlash I faced was enormous. All of his groupies shunned me and laughed at me. Even my own friends said that I was overreacting. Except for Natalie. She was always intuitive. She said he made her feel uncomfortable and had started following her from class to class. When his birthday came, he approached me with Callie, and Callie said, "He wants you to wish him a happy birthday." Eventually, a mutual friend called me and told me Eric had threatened to kill himself if I wouldn't talk to him again. I went back to the dean's office, and this time, every dean, vice principal, and even the principal got involved. My school was big, and there were 550 kids in my class. The school year ended, and without the protection of the authorities there, I was fielding more phone calls. And when I blocked his number, he would call me on Callie's phone. He would drive around my neighborhood to see if my car was in the driveway. He even came to my tennis matches, the ones we initially bonded over. I could see his silhouette in the fence, watching me. By senior year, things had calmed down. His attention was elsewhere, and I had picked my classes with the dean to ensure we weren't in any together. He was still watching. I would be walking down the hallway with someone he didn't know, and all of a sudden, he would be walking with us, next to my unassuming friend. "Hi, I'm Eric. Nice to meet you." He told my friends he had decided to wait for me because we were soulmates, and I'd come around eventually. I graduated high school and moved out of town. I told my new college friends that if something ever happened to me, he was the one who did it. And that's all. There's no conclusion, really, except he always knows when I come into town. I don't know how, because I have him blocked on everything. I suspect he still checks my house. He's been arrested since, on drug charges and a few DUIs. I'm looking at his mugshots as I write this, to remember those dead eyes. Sometimes I think maybe I overreacted. Maybe it was all a joke. Or maybe not. Eric, let's not meet.